In the vast Wyoming Territory of 1881, the wealthiest cattle baroness in 3 counties watches helplessly as her disabled daughter faces a world that sees her as broken, until a humble rancher arrives with a belief that strength comes in forms no one expects. When Rebecca takes her first trembling steps in a courtroom that will decide their fate, Catherine realizes that true wealth isn't measured in gold or land, but in the courage to redefine what it means to be whole. Will a mother's love and a stranger's faith be enough to prove that some victories are worth more than all the riches in the world? Thunder crashed across the Wyoming sky like God's own anger, shaking the massive windows of the Blackwood Ranch mansion. Catherine Blackwood pressed her face against the cold glass, watching lightning split the darkness over her endless cattle lands. In her arms, 7-year-old Rebecca sat perfectly still, her small legs wrapped in a soft blanket that would never need to be dirty from running and playing. "Mama, why do the storms always come at night?" Rebecca asked, her green eyes reflecting the lightning flashes. Her voice was sweet but tired, the kind of tired that came from spending every day in the same chair, watching the same view. Catherine's heart squeezed tight. "Maybe because that's when the sky needs to cry the most, sweetheart." The year was 1881, and the Wyoming Territory stretched out like a golden ocean beyond their porch. Catherine owned more land than anyone could ride across in a full day, more cattle than she could count, and more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. But none of it could fix what was broken in her little girl. The storm rattled the house like a giant shaking a toy box. Rebecca jumped in her mother's arms, and Catherine held her tighter. "It's just noise, baby. The house is strong." "Am I strong, Mama?" The question hit Catherine harder than the thunder. She looked down at her daughter's face, so beautiful, so smart, so full of questions that Catherine didn't know how to answer. The doctors from the big city had used words like permanent and hopeless and learned to accept. But how could a mother accept that her child would never run through the fields or climb trees or dance at her own wedding? "You're the strongest person I know," Catherine whispered. But the words felt like lies in her mouth. Outside, the rain began to fall in sheets, washing the dust from the windows and turning the world into a blur of gray and brown. Catherine's ranch hands were probably huddled in the bunkhouse, playing cards and telling stories about the old days when cowboys were heroes and every problem could be solved with a fast horse and a steady gun. Those days seemed like fairy tales now. Catherine had learned that real life was much harder than any story. Real life gave you a beautiful daughter who would never walk. Real life made you the richest woman in 3 counties but couldn't buy you the one thing you wanted most. Rebecca shifted in her arms, trying to get comfortable. The wooden chair with wheels that Catherine had ordered from Denver sat empty nearby, waiting for morning when Rebecca would spend another day watching the world instead of being part of it. "Tell me about the horses again," Rebecca said, the same request she made every night during storms. Catherine began the familiar story about the wild mustangs that ran free across the plains, about how they galloped with their manes flying and their hooves thundering like drums. She told Rebecca about the lead mare who was smart and brave, about the young colts who played and wrestled in the grass. But as she spoke, Catherine's voice caught. How could she describe running and jumping and playing to a child who had never done any of those things? How could she paint pictures of freedom for someone trapped in a body that wouldn't obey? The lightning flashed again, and for a moment, Catherine saw something in the distance. A light moving across her land. It was probably just one of her men checking on the cattle, making sure they were safe from the storm. But something about the way the light moved made her curious. "Someone's out there," she said, more to herself than to Rebecca. "In the storm. People do brave things sometimes, even when it's scary." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, thinking, "Do you think I could be brave, Mama? Even if I can't walk?" Catherine felt tears start in her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, you're already the bravest person I know." But even as she said it, Catherine wondered if she was telling the truth. How could Rebecca be brave when she spent every day sitting in the same spot, never taking risks or facing challenges? How could anyone be brave from a chair? The storm began to calm, the thunder moving off toward the mountains. Soon the rain became a gentle pattering on the roof, and Rebecca's eyes grew heavy. "Will you carry me to bed, Mama?" Catherine lifted her daughter carefully, feeling how light she was, how fragile. As she walked toward the stairs, she caught sight of herself in the hall mirror. A woman of 28 who looked 40, with worry lines around her eyes and gray threads in her dark hair. She had everything money could buy, but she felt poorer than the day she'd arrived in Wyoming as a young bride. Her husband had left her this empire, but what good was an empire if you couldn't share it with the person you loved most? Tomorrow would bring another day of watching Rebecca sit by the window, another day of feeling helpless, another day of wondering if there was something, anything, she hadn't tried yet. But tonight, as Catherine tucked Rebecca into bed and kissed her forehead, she made a promise to herself. Somehow, someway, she would find a way to give her daughter the life she deserved. Even if it meant admitting that all her money and power weren't enough. Even if it meant asking for help. The morning sun painted the Wyoming grasslands gold as Catherine stood on her porch, watching her ranch hands drive the cattle toward the southern pastures. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp, but her heart still felt heavy from the night before. Rebecca sat beside her in the wheeled chair, drawing pictures of horses in a sketchbook with colored pencils. "Mama, look!" Rebecca held up her drawing. A family of horses running across a field, their legs stretched out in full gallop. "This one's the mama, and this little one is the baby." Catherine smiled, but the picture made her chest tight. "They're beautiful, sweetheart. You're such a good artist. I wish I could see real horses run up close," Rebecca said, her voice wistful. "Not just from the porch." Before Catherine could answer, a sound made her look up. A wagon was coming down the long dirt road that led to her ranch, moving slowly because the horse pulling it looked tired. The wagon itself was simple and worn, not like the fancy carriages that usually visited the Blackwood Ranch. "Who's that, Mama?" Rebecca asked, shading her eyes with her hand. Catherine frowned. She wasn't expecting any visitors, and something about the humble wagon made her uncomfortable. Rich people didn't usually travel in such simple ways, and poor people didn't usually visit her ranch unless they were looking for work. The wagon stopped at the gate, and a tall man climbed down. He was wearing simple clothes, brown pants, a blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. His boots were dusty, and his hands looked rough from hard work. But his face was kind, and when he smiled, his whole face lit up. "Mrs. Blackwood?" he called out, approaching the porch. "I'm James Crawford. I own a small ranch about 5 miles north of here." Catherine's back straightened. She had heard of Crawford. He was one of the small ranchers who struggled to make ends meet. What could he possibly want from her? "Good morning, Mr. Crawford," she said coolly. "How can I help you?" James removed his hat, revealing brown hair that was getting long because he probably couldn't afford regular haircuts. "I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am. I know you're busy, but I was hoping to talk to you about grazing rights for the winter." Catherine's frown deepened. "Grazing rights?" "Yes, ma'am. My land isn't big enough to feed all my cattle through the winter, and I heard you might have some unused pasture. I'd be happy to pay rent, of course." Catherine was about to say no immediately. She didn't rent land to small ranchers, it was too much trouble, and she didn't need the small amount of money it would bring. But before she could speak, Rebecca wheeled her chair forward. "Are you a real cowboy?" Rebecca asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. James's face softened as he looked at the little girl. "I suppose I am, miss. I take care of cattle and horses, and I sleep under the stars sometimes." "Do you have adventures?" James chuckled. "Well, last week I had to rescue a calf that got stuck in a creek. And just yesterday, I helped a mama cow who was having trouble with her baby. Does that count as adventure?" Rebecca clapped her hands. "Yes, that's exactly what cowboys do." Catherine felt something twist in her stomach. She didn't like seeing Rebecca so excited about this stranger's simple life. What if Rebecca started thinking that her own life was boring compared to his adventures? "Mr. Crawford," Catherine said firmly, "I'm afraid I don't rent grazing land. You'll need to find another solution." James's smile faded a little, but he didn't look angry. "I understand, ma'am. I know you must be very busy with your own cattle. Do you have horses?" Rebecca asked before Catherine could end the conversation. "I have 3, James said. A big brown one named Thunder, a black one called Midnight, And a young one I call Sunrise because she's golden like the morning sun. Are they fast? Thunder is the fastest horse in the county, James said proudly. But Sunrise is still learning. She's young and sometimes scared, but she's getting braver every day. Catherine noticed how James talked about his horses like they were people, with feelings and personalities. Most men talked about animals like they were just tools for work. I love horses, Rebecca said. I draw pictures of them all the time. Want to see? Before Catherine could stop her, Rebecca was showing James her sketchbook. He studied each drawing carefully, making comments about the horse's expressions and asking questions about the stories behind the pictures. This is really good, James said, looking at a drawing of a horse with a hurt leg. What happened to this one? She got hurt, but she's getting better, Rebecca explained. Sometimes being hurt doesn't mean you can't be brave. James looked at Rebecca with new respect. That's very wise. I think this horse is lucky to have such a smart artist drawing her story. Catherine felt her cheeks burn. She could see what was happening. James was being kind to Rebecca, and Rebecca was soaking up his attention like a flower soaks up rain. But this man was a stranger, and Catherine had learned not to trust strangers, especially ones who wanted something from her. Mr. Crawford, she said, standing up. I'm sorry, but I have business to attend to. Perhaps you should try the Morrison Ranch to the east. James nodded and put his hat back on. Of course, ma'am. Thank you for your time. He turned to Rebecca. It was very nice meeting you, miss. Keep drawing those horses. They're beautiful. As James walked back to his wagon, Rebecca called out, Will you come back sometime? James paused and looked at Catherine, asking permission with his eyes. Catherine's jaw tightened. She didn't want this man coming around, filling Rebecca's head with stories about adventures and freedom. We'll see, Catherine said, which wasn't really an answer. James climbed into his wagon and drove away, leaving dust clouds in the air. Catherine watched him go, feeling relieved but also strangely empty. He was nice, Mama, Rebecca said. And he really looked at my pictures, not just pretended to look. Catherine sat back down, her mind spinning. She had dozens of employees, but none of them ever talked to Rebecca the way James had. Like she was a real person with interesting thoughts, not just a poor little girl to be pitied. Can we invite him for dinner sometime? Rebecca asked hopefully. I don't think that's a good idea, sweetheart. Why not? Catherine struggled for an answer. How could she explain that she was afraid? Not afraid of James himself, but afraid of what he represented. A world of simple pleasures and genuine kindness that she had almost forgotten existed. A world where people might see Rebecca as a whole person instead of a broken doll. But what if that world was just another disappointment waiting to happen? The barn door slammed shut with a bang that echoed across the Blackwood Ranch like a gunshot. Catherine marched toward the main house, her boots clicking angrily on the wooden porch boards, while her foreman Pete Wilson hurried behind her with bad news written all over his weathered face. Ma'am, I'm telling you we got a real problem, Pete said, his voice tight with worry. The Harrison Ranch is claiming our cattle crossed onto their land and ate their grass. They're demanding payment, and they got the sheriff involved. Catherine stopped so suddenly that Pete almost bumped into her. What did you say? Old man Harrison is saying we owe him $500 for damaged pasture. Says our fence is built wrong and our cattle been trespassing for weeks. Catherine felt her blood turn to ice. $500 wasn't much money to her. But it wasn't about the money. It was about something much more dangerous. People challenging her right to own and control her land. In a territory where women weren't supposed to run big ranches, any sign of weakness could bring down everything she'd built. Where's the boundary dispute exactly? She asked, her mind already working on solutions. Right along Crawford's property line. The small rancher you talked to last week? His land sits right between ours and Harrison's. Problem is, nobody's quite sure where the exact boundary is supposed to be. Catherine's heart sank. James Crawford again. The man seemed to appear everywhere just when she needed him least. But now she found herself in the uncomfortable position of needing something from him. His testimony about where the real property lines were drawn. Get my horse ready, she said. I'm going to talk to Mr. Crawford. An hour later, Catherine rode her black mare across the rolling hills toward James's small ranch. She hadn't been this far from her house in months, and the freedom of riding alone felt both scary and exciting. The wind whipped through her hair, and for a moment, she remembered what it felt like to be young and fearless. James's ranch was smaller than she'd expected, but everything was neat and well cared for. His house was just a simple log cabin, but the windows were clean and there were flowers planted by the front door. His few cattle looked healthy and content, grazing peacefully in a small pasture. Catherine found James working with a young horse in a fenced area behind his barn. The horse was limping, favoring its right front leg, and James was speaking to it in low, patient tones. "Easy girl," James said softly. "I know it hurts, but you're going to be fine. Just let me help you." Catherine watched, fascinated, as James gently examined the horse's leg. His hands were sure and gentle, and the horse, despite its obvious pain, seemed to trust him completely. "It's not broken," James said, though Catherine hadn't asked. "Just a bad bruise. She'll be running again in a few days." "How can you tell?" Catherine asked, surprising herself by being curious. James looked up, his face lighting up with a smile. "Mrs. Blackwood, I didn't hear you ride up. To answer your question, you learn to read the signs. See how she's putting some weight on it? And her ears are forward, not back. Pain makes animals angry, but she's not angry, just sore." Catherine felt a strange flutter in her chest. When was the last time someone had explained something to her instead of just telling her what to do? "You seem to know a lot about horses. My father was a horse doctor back in Texas. He taught me that animals are a lot like people. They just need someone to listen to them." Catherine thought about Rebecca, who spent so much time listening to other people but rarely had anyone really listen to her. "Mr. Crawford, I need to ask you something. There's a boundary dispute between my ranch and the Harrison place. Your property is right in the middle of it." James's expression grew serious. "I heard Harrison was stirring up trouble." "What kind of dispute?" "He's claiming my cattle damaged his land, but I think he's lying about where the boundary actually is. Would you be willing to testify about what you know?" James was quiet for a long moment, still stroking the injured horse's neck. "That depends on what you're willing to do for me." Catherine stiffened. "What do you mean?" "I still need those grazing rights for the winter. My cattle won't survive without more food, and you have more land than you can use. Help me save my animals, and I'll help you with your legal problem." Catherine felt trapped. She didn't want to get involved with small ranchers and their problems, but she needed James's help. "This is business, Mr. Crawford. Nothing personal." "Everything's personal when it comes to taking care of what matters to you," James said. "But yes, I understand. Business." They shook hands, and Catherine was surprised by how calloused and strong James's hands were. These were hands that worked hard every day, not like the soft hands of the businessmen who usually dealt with her. "There's one more thing," James said. "I'd like to visit your daughter again. She seemed lonely when I met her, and I remember what that felt like." Catherine's protective instincts flared up. "Rebecca isn't your concern." "No, ma'am, but loneliness is everybody's concern. I'm not trying to interfere. I just think she might enjoy having a friend." Catherine wanted to say no, but something in James's voice made her pause. He wasn't asking for anything except to be kind to a child who had very few friends. "I'll think about it." As Catherine rode home, her mind was spinning with new worries. She had solved one problem but created another. Now James Crawford would be coming to her ranch regularly, and she wasn't sure how she felt about that. He was different from other men she knew. Gentler, more thoughtful, but also more direct in ways that made her uncomfortable. When she reached home, she found Rebecca on the porch, drawing in her sketchbook as usual. But today, her daughter's pictures were different. Instead of horses running free, Rebecca had drawn a horse with a hurt leg being helped by a kind man. "How did you know to draw that?" Catherine asked. Rebecca looked up with bright eyes. "I dreamed about it. Sometimes I dream about horses that need help, and there's always someone there to make them better." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if Rebecca had somehow seen what had happened at James's ranch, even though she'd been miles away. "Do you think Mr. Crawford will come back, Mama?" Catherine sat down beside her daughter's chair. "Yes, sweetheart. I think he will." "Good," Rebecca said, returning to her drawing. "I have so many questions to ask him." Catherine watched her daughter's face, seeing an excitement there that had been missing for months. Maybe letting James visit wouldn't be such a bad thing after all. Rebecca needed something to look forward to, and if James could provide that, perhaps Catherine should be grateful instead of worried. But as she looked out over her vast ranch, Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. And change, in her experience, usually meant danger. Rebecca's laughter rang out across the ranch yard like music Catherine hadn't heard in years. From her office window, Catherine watched her daughter sitting in her wheeled chair beside the corral, clapping her hands as James worked with a young colt. It had been 3 weeks since their business arrangement began, and James had kept his word about both the boundary dispute and his visits. "Look, Mama," Rebecca called out. "Thunder is learning to trust Mr. Crawford." Catherine stepped onto the porch, her heart doing something funny in her chest. The colt, a beautiful golden animal with a white star on his forehead, was allowing James to touch his neck for the first time. James's voice carried across the yard, low and encouraging. "That's it, boy. Nobody's going to hurt you. You're safe here." The words made Catherine's throat tighten. When was the last time someone had told her she was safe? When was the last time she'd felt safe? "Mrs. Blackwood," James said, noticing her on the porch. "Would you like to meet Thunder? He's finally ready for visitors." Catherine found herself walking toward the corral, drawn by something she couldn't name. The colt was beautiful, but she could see the wariness in his dark eyes, the way he stood ready to run at any moment. "He's been hurt before," James explained. "Someone was rough with him when he was young. Now he thinks all people are dangerous." "How do you know that?" Catherine asked. "The signs are all there. See how he keeps his head high. How he won't let anyone behind him. That's learned behavior. Someone taught him that people cause pain." Catherine felt like James was talking about more than just horses. "Can he be fixed?" "He's not broken, ma'am. He's just scared. Big difference. Scared can be healed with patience and kindness. Broken is something else entirely." Rebecca wheeled her chair closer to the fence. "Can I touch him?" "Not yet, little miss. He needs to trust us first. But watch this." James pulled a carrot from his pocket and held it out to the colt. Sometimes the best way to make friends is to offer something good. The colt stretched his neck toward the carrot, his nostrils flaring. Slowly, carefully, he took the treat from James's hand. "He's so brave," Rebecca said, her eyes shining. "Even though he's scared, he's still trying." Catherine looked at her daughter, seeing something new in her face. Rebecca was identifying with the frightened colt, seeing herself in his struggle to trust. The realization hit Catherine like a physical blow. Her own daughter was scared, just like the horse. Scared of being hurt, scared of trying, scared of hoping for things that might not come true. "Mr. Crawford," Rebecca said suddenly, "do you think some people are like Thunder? Scared to try new things because they might get hurt?" James glanced at Catherine, then back at Rebecca. "I think everyone gets scared sometimes. The brave ones are the people who try anyway. Even if they might fall down? Especially then. Falling down isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Not trying is worse." Catherine felt her chest tighten. Was James talking about Rebecca's disability? Did he understand that her daughter was afraid to even try walking because she might fail? "I fell down once," Rebecca said quietly. "When I was little. I was trying to walk, and I fell, and it hurt really bad. I haven't tried since then." The words hit Catherine like a punch to the stomach. Rebecca remembered trying to walk. She had never told Catherine about falling, about being afraid to try again. "Falls happen," James said gently. "But you know what? Thunder fell down yesterday when he was running in the pasture. Did that stop him from running today?" Rebecca giggled. "No, he's still running. That's because he learned something important. Falling down doesn't mean you can't get back up. It just means you're trying to do something difficult. Catherine watched her daughter's face transform with understanding. For the first time in years, Rebecca was hearing someone talk about her limitations not as permanent walls but as temporary obstacles. "Would you like to help me feed Thunder?" James asked Rebecca. "Can I? Really?" "Of course. Here, take this carrot. Hold it flat in your palm so he can't accidentally bite your fingers." Catherine held her breath as Rebecca reached through the fence rails with the carrot. The colt approached slowly, and when he gently took the treat, Rebecca's face lit up with pure joy. "I did it. Mama, did you see? I fed him." Catherine felt tears start in her eyes. Such a simple thing, but for Rebecca it was a victory. She had interacted with an animal, taken a small risk, and succeeded. "You did wonderfully, sweetheart," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. Over the next hour, Catherine found herself staying by the corral, watching James work with both the colt and Rebecca. He had a way of including Rebecca in everything he did, explaining what he was doing and why, asking for her opinions and treating her ideas seriously. "Why do you spend so much time with her?" Catherine asked when Rebecca had gone inside for lunch. James continued brushing Thunder's coat, his movements slow and steady. "She reminds me of my sister. The one who couldn't walk? The one everyone said couldn't walk. Elena proved them wrong, but it took her years because she was afraid to try. She'd been told so many times that she was broken that she believed it." Catherine felt a chill. What changed? Someone finally told her she wasn't broken. Someone believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. The words hung in the air between them. Catherine knew James was talking about more than his sister. He was talking about Rebecca, about the way Catherine had accepted the doctor's verdicts without question, about the way she'd stopped encouraging Rebecca to try new things. "I don't want her to be disappointed," Catherine said softly. "Disappointment is part of life. But so is hope. Which one do you want her to remember?" That evening, Catherine sat beside Rebecca's bed, watching her daughter sleep. On the nightstand was a new drawing, a picture of a little girl in a wheelchair feeding a golden horse. But in the picture, the girl was smiling, and the horse was no longer afraid. Catherine picked up the drawing and studied it. For the first time, Rebecca had drawn herself not as a victim but as someone who could help others. Someone who had something to offer the world. Maybe James was right. Maybe the worst thing wasn't falling down. Maybe the worst thing was never trying to get back up. As Catherine turned off the lamp, she made a decision. Tomorrow she would ask James to help Rebecca try walking again. Not because she expected miracles, but because her daughter deserved the chance to be brave. Even if it meant risking disappointment. Even if it meant Catherine had to be brave too. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the scent of horses and hope and the possibility that tomorrow might be different from today. Catherine closed her eyes and, for the first time in months, allowed herself to dream of her daughter taking steps toward a future that neither of them could yet imagine. The official letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a rider whose horse was lathered with sweat from hard travel. Catherine's hands shook as she broke the government seal and read the words that would change everything. Notice of land review, Blackwood Ranch Holdings under investigation. "What does it say, Mama?" Rebecca asked from her chair on the porch, where she'd been sketching horses as usual. Catherine forced her voice to stay calm. "Just business, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." But inside, Catherine's heart was racing like a runaway horse. The letter was worse than she'd first thought. Harrison hadn't just complained about the boundary dispute. He'd convinced the territorial government that Catherine was unfit to own such vast lands. The letter used words like inappropriate management and questionable judgment and family circumstances that compromised decision-making ability. Catherine knew what family circumstances meant. They were talking about Rebecca. Mrs. Blackwood? James appeared around the corner of the house, leading Thunder by a rope. The colt had grown more trusting over the past weeks. But today he seemed nervous, picking up on the tension in the air. "Mr. Crawford, I need to speak with you privately," Catherine said, her voice tight. They walked to the barn, leaving Rebecca on the porch with her drawing. Once they were out of earshot, Catherine showed James the letter. "They're saying I'm not capable of running the ranch because I have a disabled daughter," she said, her voice shaking with anger. They're claiming that my emotional state makes me unreliable. James read the letter carefully, his jaw growing tighter with each line. This is about more than land, isn't it? This is about power. Of course it is. Harrison wants my ranch and he's found a way to take it. In this territory, women barely have the right to own property at all. A woman with a damaged child? That's all the excuse they need. What will you do? Catherine felt trapped like an animal in a cage. I don't know. I could fight it in court, but that could take years and cost everything I have. Or I could sell to Harrison before he forces me out. But then Rebecca would inherit nothing. James was quiet for a long moment, stroking Thunder's neck. There might be another way. What do you mean? Marriage. If you were married to someone the government considered stable, they couldn't question your fitness to own land. Catherine stared at him. Are you suggesting I marry someone I don't love just to protect my property? I'm suggesting you marry someone who respects you and cares about Rebecca's future. Someone who would be a partner, not a master. The words hung between them like a bridge Catherine wasn't sure she was ready to cross. James, are you? I'm saying I'd be honored to help you protect what's yours. This ranch belongs to you and Rebecca. No one should be able to take it away because of prejudice and fear. Catherine felt her world spinning. Marriage to James would solve her legal problems, but it would also mean trusting someone with her heart, her daughter, and her future. Could she take such a risk? I need time to think, she said. Of course, but don't take too long. These government reviews move fast once they start. That evening, Catherine sat in her study, staring at a photograph of her late husband. Robert had been a good man, but their marriage had been arranged by their families. She'd learned to care for him, but she'd never felt the flutter of excitement she felt when James smiled at her. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Rebecca wheeled herself into the room, her face serious. Mama, I know something's wrong. Is it about me? Catherine's heart clenched. Why would you think that? Because people always get that worried look when they talk about me. Like I'm a problem that needs to be solved. Catherine knelt beside Rebecca's chair and took her daughter's hands. You are not a problem, sweetheart. You're the most important thing in my life. But other people don't think so, do they? They think I make you weak. The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. How had her 8-year-old daughter become so wise about the cruelty of the world? Some people are afraid of things they don't understand, Catherine said carefully. They think being different means being less valuable. Do you think that? Never. Not for 1 second. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, then said, Mr. Crawford doesn't think I'm a problem. He talks to me like I'm a regular person. He does, doesn't he? Mama, do you like Mr. Crawford? Catherine felt her cheeks warm. Why do you ask? Because you smile different when he's here, like you're happy inside, not just pretending to be happy. Catherine was amazed by her daughter's insight. Would you like it if Mr. Crawford came to live with us? Rebecca's eyes lit up. Forever. Maybe. If he wanted to and if you wanted him to. I'd like that very much. He makes you laugh. And he makes me feel brave. Catherine hugged her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair. Then maybe we should ask him. The next morning, Catherine found James working with Thunder in the corral. The colt was walking calmly beside him, no longer afraid of human touch. He's made amazing progress, Catherine said. He just needed someone to believe in him, James replied, but his eyes were on Catherine, not the horse. James, I've been thinking about what you said, about marriage. James stopped walking, his full attention on her. And I have conditions. This ranch stays in my name. Rebecca is my daughter first, and any decisions about her future go through me. And if you ever change your mind about accepting her as she is, I won't, James said firmly. Catherine, I'm not asking to own you or control you. I'm asking to stand beside you, to help you fight for what matters. Catherine felt tears threatening. Why would you want to take on our problems? Because they're not just problems. They're part of a life worth living. You and Rebecca, this ranch, the chance to build something good together, that's not a burden. That's a gift. Catherine looked at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to prayers she hadn't known she was praying. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. As they stood in the morning sun, with thunder grazing peacefully nearby, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope, not just for survival but for happiness. All right, she said. Let's get married. James's smile was brighter than the Wyoming sunrise. When? Soon. Before the government review is finished. Before Harrison can find another way to hurt us. And Rebecca? She's the one who convinced me. She said you make her feel brave. James nodded, understanding. Then we'll make this work. All of us together. Catherine felt the weight of years of worry begin to lift from her shoulders. She wasn't surrendering. She was choosing to fight with an ally instead of fighting alone. And for the first time since Rebecca's birth, Catherine believed they might actually win. The town of Clearwater buzzed with whispered conversations and sideways glances as Catherine, James, and Rebecca made their way to the courthouse for the marriage ceremony. Catherine held her head high, but inside, her stomach twisted with nerves. Every person they passed seemed to be staring at Rebecca's wheeled chair, and Catherine could almost hear their thoughts. Poor woman, marrying a nobody because no real man would want a wife with a broken child. Are you ready for this? James asked quietly, offering Catherine his arm as they climbed the courthouse steps. As ready as I'll ever be, Catherine replied, though her voice shook slightly. Rebecca, dressed in her finest blue dress, looked up at them with bright eyes. This is like a fairy tale, isn't it? The princess and the kind knight getting married to save the kingdom. Catherine smiled despite her nerves. Something like that, sweetheart. But as they entered the courthouse, Catherine's smile faded. Sitting in the front row of seats was William Harrison, his cold eyes fixed on their little family with undisguised hatred. He wasn't alone. Beside him sat three men Catherine recognized as territorial officials, their faces stern and disapproving. What's he doing here? Catherine whispered to James. Making sure we know he's not giving up, James replied grimly. The ceremony was brief and practical, conducted by Judge Morrison, an elderly man who'd known Catherine's husband. As they exchanged simple vows, Catherine found herself looking into James's eyes and seeing something she hadn't expected. Genuine affection mixed with determination. Do you, James Crawford, take Catherine Blackwood to be your wife, to support and protect her and her daughter in all circumstances? I do, James said firmly, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. And do you, Catherine Blackwood, take James Crawford to be your husband, to trust and respect him as your partner in life? Catherine hesitated for just a moment, thinking of all the things that could go wrong. Then she looked at Rebecca, who was beaming with happiness, and at James, who was looking at her with patient understanding. I do, she said, and meant it. But as Judge Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison stood up from his seat, his voice cutting through the moment like a knife. Your Honor, I object to this union. The courthouse fell silent. Judge Morrison frowned. Mr. Harrison, the ceremony is complete. You cannot object after the fact. I can if the marriage is fraudulent, Harrison said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. This is clearly a business arrangement designed to help Mrs. Blackwood avoid the government review. She's making a mockery of the institution of marriage. Catherine felt her face burn with embarrassment and anger. How dare he turn her wedding into a public spectacle? Furthermore, Harrison continued, I have witnesses who will testify that Mrs. Blackwood is emotionally unstable, that she makes poor decisions, and that her obsession with her damaged daughter has clouded her judgment. This man is taking advantage of a desperate woman. James stepped forward, his hand moving to Catherine's arm. Mr. Harrison, you're out of line. Am I? Then explain why a successful rancher would tie himself to a woman with such obvious burdens, unless he's after her money. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Catherine felt the eyes of every person in the courthouse examining her, judging her, finding her wanting. She had known this might happen, but hearing it spoken aloud made her feel small and ashamed. That's enough, Judge Morrison said sharply. Mr. Harrison, you will sit down or be removed from my courtroom. But the damage was done. Catherine could see the doubt in people's faces, the way they looked at James with suspicion and at Rebecca with pity. The fairy tale Rebecca had imagined was turning into a nightmare. Mama, Rebecca said quietly, why is that man so mean? Catherine knelt beside her daughter's chair, her voice shaking with emotion. Because some people think being different makes you less important. But they're wrong. He's scared, James said, his voice calm but his eyes blazing with anger. He's scared because he knows that love and kindness are stronger than cruelty and greed. Harrison laughed coldly. Love? Is that what you call this arrangement? A crippled child and a desperate woman. The words hung in the air like poison. Catherine felt something break inside her. Not her spirit, but her fear. She had spent so long worried about what people thought, so long trying to protect Rebecca from cruel words, that she had forgotten her own strength. Yes, Catherine said, standing up and facing Harrison directly. Love. The kind of love that sees worth in people regardless of their challenges. The kind of love that builds up instead of tearing down. The kind of love that you obviously know nothing about. The courthouse was dead silent. Catherine continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. You want to know why James Crawford married me? Because he sees what you refuse to see. He sees a woman who built a successful ranch from nothing. He sees a daughter who faces every day with courage and grace. He sees a family worth protecting. And you, Catherine said, pointing at Harrison, see only what you want to see. A woman you can intimidate and a child you can use as a weapon. But we're not your victims. We're your neighbors, and we deserve better. Rebecca clapped her hands, her face glowing with pride. Tell him, Mama. James moved to stand beside Catherine, his presence solid and supportive. Mr. Harrison, you can challenge our marriage all you want, but you can't challenge the fact that we're a family now. And families protect each other. Harrison's face was red with anger, but before he could respond, Judge Morrison banged his gavel. This ceremony is concluded. Mr. and Mrs. Crawford, congratulations. Mr. Harrison, you will conduct any further challenges through proper legal channels, not in my courtroom. As they left the courthouse, Catherine felt different. Not because she was married, but because she had finally stood up for herself and Rebecca in public. She had refused to be ashamed of who they were. Are you sorry? She asked James as they walked to their wagon. Sorry for what? For getting mixed up in all this. For Harrison's accusations. For the way people look at us. James stopped walking and turned to face her. Catherine, I married you because I admire your strength, not despite your challenges. I married you because Rebecca is an amazing little girl who deserves a father who sees her potential. And I married you because I believe we can build something beautiful together. Even if it's difficult? Especially because it's difficult. Easy things don't usually matter much. That evening, as they sat on the porch of what was now their shared home, Catherine watched James help Rebecca with her evening exercises. He was patient and encouraging, never pushing too hard but never letting her give up either. One more try, he said gently. I know you're tired, but I can see you getting stronger. Rebecca gripped the wooden parallel bars James had built and pulled herself up on shaking legs. For a moment, she stood upright, her face fierce with concentration. I did it, she gasped, and then collapsed back into her chair, exhausted but triumphant. You did indeed, James said, his voice thick with emotion. You're the bravest person I know. Catherine felt tears on her cheeks. Today had been full of challenges, but it had also been full of small victories. They had faced their enemies together, and they had emerged stronger. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were a family. Imperfect, complicated, but real. And that was enough. Fire. The word ripped through Catherine's dreams like a blade, dragging her from sleep to find James shaking her shoulder in the pre-dawn darkness. Through their bedroom window, an orange glow painted the Wyoming sky, and the smell of smoke filled the air like a warning from hell itself. The south pasture, James said, his voice tight with urgency. Lightning must have struck during the night. The grass is burning, and it's heading straight for the cattle. Catherine was out of bed and pulling on clothes before her mind fully caught up with the danger. Fire was every rancher's worst nightmare. It could destroy years of work in a single night, killing animals and turning fertile land into ash. "How bad is it?" she asked, her fingers fumbling with the buttons of her shirt. "Bad enough. The wind's pushing it toward the main herd, and there's no rain in sight." They rushed to Rebecca's room, where the 8-year-old was sitting up in bed, her face pale with fear. "Mama, I can smell smoke. Are we in danger?" Catherine's heart clenched. How do you explain to a child that everything you've built might burn down in a single night? "We're going to be fine, sweetheart. James and I have to go help fight the fire, but Mrs. Chun will stay with you." "I want to help too," Rebecca said, her voice small but determined. "This is grown-up work, baby. The most important thing you can do is stay safe." Catherine kissed Rebecca's forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, and tried not to think about how quickly fire could spread. If the flames reached the house, outside the ranch yard was chaos. Ranch hands were saddling horses and loading wagons with water barrels and wet sacks. The orange glow on the horizon was growing brighter, and Catherine could hear the distant sound of cattle lowing in distress. "Pete," Catherine called to her foreman. "How many head are in the south pasture?" "Nearly 300, ma'am. We're trying to move them, but they're spooked. Fire makes animals crazy with fear." Catherine climbed onto her horse, her mind racing. 300 cattle represented months of work and thousands of dollars. More than that, they were living creatures who depended on her for protection. "We'll split up," James said, swinging onto his own horse. "You take half the men and try to drive the cattle north. I'll take the others and work on fighting the fire directly." "It's too dangerous," Catherine protested. "Fire moves faster than horses. So do we if we're smart about it." "Catherine, we can't save everything, but we can save what matters most." As they rode toward the flames, Catherine felt the heat hit her face like a physical blow. The fire was a living thing, consuming everything in its path with greedy orange tongues. The sound it made was like 1,000 voices roaring in anger. The cattle were gathered in a tight group, their eyes white with terror. Some were trying to run, but they were running in circles, too frightened to think clearly. Catherine had seen this before. Animals could die in a fire not from the flames themselves, but from panic. "Easy, boys," she called to her men. "We need to be calm so they can be calm." Fear spreads faster than fire. Working together, they began to slowly, carefully guide the frightened cattle away from the flames. It was like trying to move water with your hands. Just when you thought you had them going in the right direction, panic would take over and they would scatter. Catherine's horse danced nervously under her, sensing the danger. Sweat mixed with ash on her face, and her throat burned from the smoke. But she kept talking to the cattle in a steady, soothing voice, the same voice she used when Rebecca was scared. "That's it, come on. You're safe. Just keep moving." One young bull broke away from the group, running straight toward the flames. Without thinking, Catherine spurred her horse after him, knowing that if one animal ran into the fire, others might follow. The heat was overwhelming. Catherine could feel it drying her skin, making her eyes water. The bull was ahead of her, lost in panic, heading straight for destruction. "Come on, you stubborn fool," she muttered, riding harder than she had in years. Her horse was fast, but the bull was driven by terror, and terror gave him strength. Just as the bull reached the edge of the flames, Catherine managed to get alongside him. Using her horse to block his path, she forced him to turn away from the fire. For a moment, they rode side by side, the bull's eyes wild but no longer blind with panic. "Good boy," she whispered. "Let's go home." By the time they got the cattle to safety, the sun was rising through a sky thick with smoke. Catherine's clothes were torn, her face was black with soot, and her body ached from hours in the saddle. But they had saved the herd. James appeared out of the smoke like a ghost, his face grim with exhaustion. "The fire's under control," he said. "We lost about 50 acres of grassland, but the house is safe. The animals are safe. Catherine felt tears cutting tracks through the ash on her cheeks. We did it. We did it, James agreed, and then his arms were around her, holding her tight against his chest. She could feel his heart beating, fast and strong, and she realized that she had been more afraid of losing him than of losing the ranch. I was so scared, she whispered into his shoulder. So was I, but we faced it together. When they finally made it back to the house, they found Rebecca waiting on the porch, her face tight with worry. Mama, are you hurt? Catherine dismounted and rushed to her daughter, kneeling beside her chair. I'm fine, sweetheart. We're all fine. I was so scared, Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. I thought the fire might take you away from me. Never, Catherine said fiercely. I will never leave you. We're a family now, and families stick together no matter what. James knelt beside them, his hand gentle on Rebecca's shoulder. Your mama was the bravest person out there tonight. She saved hundreds of animals. Really? Rebecca's eyes were wide with admiration. Really? She rode right into danger to save them, just like a hero in a story. Catherine felt something shift inside her chest. For years, she had thought of herself as weak, as someone who needed protection. But tonight, she had been the protector. She had faced danger and won. I couldn't have done it without James, she said, looking at her husband with new respect. He was amazing. We make a good team, James said simply. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Catherine realized that the fire had changed something fundamental. They weren't just three people living in the same house anymore. They were a family who had faced crisis together and emerged stronger. Tomorrow we'll start replanting the burned pasture, Catherine said. It'll take time, but grass grows back. The important thing is that we're all safe. And the cattle too, Rebecca added. They're part of our family. Catherine smiled, looking at her daughter with pride. Rebecca understood something that many adults didn't, that taking care of others was what made life meaningful. Yes, Catherine said. The cattle too. We take care of what matters to us. As they prepared for bed, Catherine felt different. The fire had burned away more than just grass. It had burned away her fear of being weak, her doubt about her own strength. She was not a victim. She was a survivor. And tomorrow she would prove it again. The letter arrived 3 days after the fire, when the smell of smoke still lingered in the air like a bad memory. Catherine's hands trembled as she read the official government seal. But this time it wasn't fear that made her shake. It was anger. The Territorial Review Committee had scheduled a hearing for the following week, and they were demanding that she appear in person to defend her right to own the ranch. They couldn't wait until we recovered from the fire, Catherine said, her voice bitter as she paced the length of their kitchen. They want to kick us when we're down. James looked up from where he was helping Rebecca with her morning exercises. What exactly are they asking for? Everything. Financial records, testimony from neighbors, proof that I'm mentally and emotionally capable of managing a large ranch. They want to examine Rebecca too, to determine if her condition affects my judgment. Rebecca's small hands gripped the parallel bars tighter. They want to look at me like I'm a problem again? Catherine's heart broke at the fear in her daughter's voice. Sweetheart, you're not a problem. You're my daughter, and I love you exactly as you are. But they don't see it that way, do they? The wisdom in Rebecca's voice made Catherine want to cry. Her 8-year-old daughter understood prejudice better than most adults understood kindness. No, Catherine said honestly. They don't. But that doesn't make them right. James helped Rebecca back into her chair, his movements gentle but his expression hard. What do you need me to do? I need you to help me prove that we're not victims, that we're a strong family who can handle whatever life throws at us. We are strong, Rebecca said, her voice small but determined. We saved the cattle from the fire. We helped each other. Catherine knelt beside her daughter's chair. Yes, we did. And we're going to help each other through this too. But privately, Catherine was terrified. The hearing would be held in front of 3 territorial judges, all men who had probably never seen a woman run a business, let alone a woman with a disabled child. They would look at Rebecca and see weakness, burden, distraction. They would look at Catherine and see someone who put emotions ahead of business sense. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Catherine gathered financial records, statements from employees, letters from customers who praised her business practices. James helped by contacting other ranchers who might testify on her behalf, though many were reluctant to get involved in what they saw as a political fight. The night before the hearing, Catherine sat in Rebecca's room, watching her daughter sleep. Rebecca looked so small and fragile in her bed. Her dark hair spread across the pillow like silk. But Catherine knew that looks were deceiving. Rebecca was one of the strongest people she knew. "Are you scared, Mama?" Rebecca's voice was sleepy but alert. Catherine hadn't realized her daughter was awake. "A little. Are you?" "A little. But I keep thinking about what you said about the fire. We faced it together and we won. This is different, sweetheart. This is about people making judgments about us. But we know who we are," Rebecca said with the simple logic of childhood. "We know we're good people. That has to count for something." Catherine wished she had her daughter's faith in the goodness of people. But she had learned that knowing you were right didn't always protect you from those who wanted to prove you wrong. The hearing was held in the territorial courthouse in Cheyenne, the same building where Catherine and James had been married. But this time, the atmosphere was cold and formal. Catherine sat at a table facing 3 stern-looking judges, with James beside her and Rebecca in her wheeled chair nearby. Harrison sat across the room with his lawyer, a thin man with sharp eyes who looked like he enjoyed hurting people. The gallery was filled with townspeople, some supportive, others clearly hoping for entertainment. Judge Bradley, the lead judge, was a heavy-set man with gray whiskers and cold eyes. "Mrs. Crawford, you stand accused of being unfit to manage the extensive land holdings of the Blackwood Ranch. How do you answer these charges?" Catherine stood, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "I deny them completely, Your Honor. I have successfully managed the ranch for 5 years, through good times and bad. My financial records speak for themselves." "Your financial records are not in question," Judge Bradley said. "The question is whether your personal circumstances affect your ability to make sound business decisions. Specifically, the time and attention you devote to your disabled daughter." The words hit Catherine like a slap. They were talking about Rebecca as if she were a business expense, not a human being. "My daughter is not a burden, Your Honor. She is a blessing. And caring for her has made me a better leader, not a worse one." "How so?" Catherine thought of all the nights she had spent worrying about Rebecca, all the doctor's appointments, all the time she had to be patient when she wanted to scream. "Caring for Rebecca has taught me patience, compassion, and the importance of fighting for what matters. These are valuable qualities in any leader." Harrison's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, we have testimony from multiple sources that Mrs. Crawford has been seen crying in public, that she has made emotional decisions based on her daughter's condition, and that she has allowed her personal feelings to affect her business judgment. Such as, she hired a man with no credentials to work with her daughter, simply because he was kind to the child. She has refused profitable business deals because they would require her to spend time away from home. She has placed her daughter's needs above the needs of her business." Catherine felt her face burn. Everything they were saying was true, but they were twisting it to make her look weak. "I hired James because he understands animals and people. I have turned down business deals that would have taken me away from my responsibilities as a mother. I have always put my family first. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of strength. Or signs of a woman who cannot separate her emotions from her responsibilities." The lawyer shot back. James stood up, his voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, I have worked alongside Catherine for months now. I have seen her make difficult decisions under pressure. I have seen her risk her own safety to save livestock. I have seen her manage hundreds of employees and thousands of acres of land. She is one of the most capable people I have ever known." "And what about the child?" Judge Bradley asked. "What effect does her condition have on the household?" Catherine felt her heart stop. This was the moment she had been dreading. They were going to use Rebecca's disability against her, to prove that she was a distraction and a burden. But before Catherine could answer, Rebecca spoke up in her clear, young voice. "Your Honor, may I say something?" Judge Bradley looked surprised. "I suppose so, child." Rebecca wheeled her chair forward, her back straight and her voice steady. "I know some people think I'm a problem because I can't walk, but I'm not a problem. I'm a person, and my mama isn't weak because she takes care of me. She's strong because she loves me enough to fight for me." The courtroom was dead silent. Catherine felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of pride, not shame. "My mama built this ranch from nothing," Rebecca continued. "She employs dozens of people and takes care of thousands of animals. She saved our cattle from a fire just last week. She doesn't do these things in spite of having me as a daughter. She does them because having me taught her that everyone deserves to be protected and cared for." Judge Bradley was staring at Rebecca with something that might have been respect. "That's quite a speech, young lady." "It's not a speech, sir. It's the truth. And I think grown-ups should tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable." Catherine had never been prouder of anyone in her life. Her 8-year-old daughter had just done what she had been trying to do for years. She had demanded to be seen as a person, not a problem. The judges conferred quietly for several minutes while the courtroom waited in tense silence. Finally, Judge Bradley spoke. "Mrs. Crawford, this committee finds no evidence that you are unfit to manage your ranch holdings. Your financial records are exemplary, your character references are outstanding, and your daughter's testimony shows that you have raised a remarkably articulate and thoughtful young woman. The charges against you are dismissed." Catherine felt her knees go weak with relief. They had won. They had actually won. But as they left the courthouse, Catherine realized that the real victory wasn't the legal decision. It was the moment when Rebecca had stood up for herself and for their family. It was the moment when an 8-year-old girl had taught a room full of adults about courage, dignity, and the true meaning of strength. That night, as they celebrated at home, Catherine looked at her daughter and her husband and felt a completeness she had never experienced before. They weren't just a family anymore. They were a team, and they were unstoppable. Rebecca's scream pierced the morning air like a knife, freezing Catherine's blood as she ran from the kitchen toward the barn. What she found there made her heart stop completely. Her daughter lying on the ground beside her overturned wheelchair, her face twisted in pain, while Thunder stood nearby, his eyes wild with confusion and fear. "What happened?" Catherine gasped, dropping to her knees beside Rebecca. "I wanted to surprise you," Rebecca sobbed, her small hands clutching at the dirt. "I've been practicing walking with the bars James made, and I thought maybe I could walk to Thunder by myself. But I fell, and now I can't get up, and my leg hurts so bad." Catherine's hands shook as she examined Rebecca's right leg. It was bent at an odd angle, and Catherine could see swelling beginning around the ankle. Her worst nightmare was coming true. Rebecca had been hurt trying to do something Catherine should have prevented. "James!" Catherine shouted, her voice breaking with panic. "James, come quick!" James appeared in the barn doorway, took one look at the scene, and immediately knelt beside them. His hands were gentle but sure as he examined Rebecca's leg. "It's not broken," he said quietly, "but it's badly sprained. We need to get her to the house and call for Doc Henderson." As James carefully lifted Rebecca into his arms, Catherine felt guilt washing over her like cold water. She had been so proud of Rebecca's progress with the walking exercises, so hopeful that her daughter was getting stronger. But hope had made her careless, and now Rebecca was hurt. "I'm sorry, Mama," Rebecca whispered through her tears. "I just wanted to walk to Thunder like a normal girl." The words broke Catherine's heart. "Oh, sweetheart, you have nothing to be sorry for. You were being brave. But I failed. I fell down, and now I'm hurt, and I probably can't even use my wheelchair for a while." Catherine carried Rebecca's wheelchair while James carried Rebecca, and as they made their way to the house, Catherine's mind raced with worry. What if the injury was worse than James thought? What if Rebecca never wanted to try walking again? What if Catherine's encouragement had pushed her daughter too far? Dr. Henderson arrived within the hour, a kind-faced man in his 60s who had delivered Rebecca and treated her through various childhood illnesses. He examined Rebecca's leg carefully while she tried to be brave, biting her lip to keep from crying. "Well, young lady," he said finally, "you've given yourself quite a sprain. The good news is that nothing is broken. The bad news is that you'll need to stay off this leg for at least 2 weeks, maybe 3. 2 weeks. Rebecca's voice was small and scared. But I was just starting to get better at walking. And you will again, Dr. Henderson said firmly. This is a setback, not an ending. But you need to let your body heal properly, or you could hurt yourself worse. After the doctor left, Catherine sat beside Rebecca's bed, watching her daughter stare at the ceiling with defeated eyes. The sunshine streaming through the windows seemed to mock them both. It was a beautiful day for running and playing, but Rebecca was trapped in bed, more limited than ever. I feel like I took 10 steps backward, Rebecca said quietly. Healing isn't a straight line, Catherine replied, though her own heart was heavy with disappointment. Sometimes we have to go backward before we can go forward again. Do you think I'll ever really walk, Mama? Or am I just fooling myself? Catherine felt tears threatening. How could she answer such a question? How could she give Rebecca hope without setting her up for more heartbreak? I think you're the strongest person I know, Catherine said finally. And I think that whatever happens, you'll find a way to live a full and happy life. But what if I never walk? What if I'm always different? Then you'll still be amazing. Walking doesn't make you worth more, sweetheart. Your heart and your mind and your spirit make you valuable. But even as Catherine said the words, she wondered if she truly believed them. She had been so focused on Rebecca's physical progress that she had forgotten to celebrate all the other ways her daughter was growing and changing. That evening, James found Catherine sitting on the porch, staring out at the sunset with troubled eyes. She's sleeping, he said, settling into the chair beside her. The pain medicine Dr. Henderson gave her is working. I pushed her too hard, Catherine said, her voice thick with guilt. I was so excited about her progress that I didn't think about the risks. Catherine, you didn't push her. She chose to try walking on her own. That shows courage, not recklessness. But what if I've been wrong about everything? What if I've been so focused on fixing her that I've forgotten to love her as she is? James was quiet for a long moment, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the mountains purple. Do you remember what you told me about Thunder when I first started working with him? Catherine shook her head. You said he wasn't broken, just scared. You said the difference mattered. What's your point? My point is that you've always seen Rebecca as whole, not broken. You've encouraged her to try new things, but you've never made her feel like she wasn't enough as she was. That's not pushing too hard. That's being a good mother. Catherine felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Then why do I feel like I failed her? Because you love her. Love makes us worry about things we can't control. But Rebecca didn't get hurt because you failed her. She got hurt because she was being brave. What if she's afraid to try again? Then we'll help her find her courage again. But my guess is that she's stronger than we think. She's your daughter, after all. The next morning, Catherine woke to the sound of Rebecca's voice drifting from the living room. She found her daughter sitting up in the makeshift bed they'd arranged on the sofa, talking animatedly to Mrs. Chen, their housekeeper. And then Thunder looked at me like he was asking if I was okay. Rebecca was saying, I think he was worried about me too. Animals know when people are hurt, Mrs. Chen said in her gentle voice. They have big hearts. Catherine listened from the doorway, amazed by how cheerful Rebecca sounded. Where was the defeated girl from yesterday? Mama, Rebecca called out, noticing her. I've been thinking about what happened yesterday. Catherine came into the room, preparing herself for tears or anger. What about it, sweetheart? I think I learned something important. I learned that falling down isn't the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing would be never trying at all. Catherine stared at her daughter in amazement. You're not afraid to try walking again? Well, maybe a little afraid, but I'm more afraid of giving up. Dr. Henderson said this is just a setback, not an ending. So when my leg gets better, I want to keep practicing. Are you sure? You don't have to. I want to, Mama. Not because I think I'm broken and need to be fixed, but because I want to see how far I can go. I want to know what I'm capable of. Catherine sat down beside Rebecca's bed, her heart swelling with pride and love. "You amaze me, you know that? I learned it from you. You never give up on things that matter. And you matter to me more than anything in the world." "I know. And that's why I'm going to keep trying. Not just with walking, but with everything. I want to make you proud." "Sweetheart, you already make me proud every single day. Not because of what you can or can't do, but because of who you are." As Catherine held her daughter's hand, she realized that Rebecca's accident had taught them both something important. Courage wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up, over and over again, until you reached your goal or found a new one. And Rebecca, at 8 years old, had more courage than most adults Catherine knew. "When I get better," Rebecca said, "I want to learn how to help James with thunder. I think the horses might understand me better because I know what it's like to be afraid of trying new things." Catherine smiled through her tears. "I think that's a wonderful idea. And maybe I can help other children who are scared too. I could show them that being different isn't the same as being less." Catherine looked at her daughter with new eyes. Rebecca wasn't just healing from her injury. She was growing into someone who would help others heal too. "I think you're going to change the world, sweetheart," Catherine said. "Maybe. But first, I have to finish changing myself." As Catherine tucked Rebecca in for her afternoon nap, she marveled at her daughter's wisdom. Rebecca had turned a setback into a stepping stone, a reason to give up into a reason to keep going. Maybe that was what true strength looked like. Not the absence of falling, but the refusal to stay down. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard as Catherine stood watching something that made her heart race with both terror and hope. Rebecca, her leg finally healed from the sprain 3 weeks ago, was standing between the wooden parallel bars James had built, her small hands gripping the rails so tightly her knuckles were white. "I can do this," Rebecca whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the morning breeze. "I can do this." Catherine wanted to rush forward, to catch Rebecca if she fell, to wrap her in protective arms and keep her safe from disappointment. But James's gentle hand on her shoulder held her back. "Let her try," he said quietly. "She needs to know you believe in her." Catherine bit her lip, watching as Rebecca shifted her weight forward. For 8 years, Catherine had carried her daughter everywhere, had been her legs when Rebecca's wouldn't work. Now, watching Rebecca struggle to take even one step, Catherine felt like she was watching her child grow up and away from her. "One step," Rebecca said, her voice stronger now. "Just one step." Her right foot moved forward, trembling with effort. For a moment, she was supporting her full weight on her legs, and Catherine held her breath. Then Rebecca's left foot followed, and she had taken her first real step in years. "I did it," Rebecca gasped, her face glowing with triumph. "Did you see? I took a step." Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. "I saw, sweetheart. I saw." But as Rebecca tried to take a second step, her legs gave out, and she collapsed back into the wheelchair that James had positioned behind her. The joy on her face flickered, replaced by frustration. "I almost had it," she said, her voice shaking. "I was so close." "You did have it," James said, kneeling beside her chair. "You took a step. That's more than you could do last month. But I want to walk all the way across the yard. I want to run to the horses. I want to be normal." Catherine's heart broke at the longing in her daughter's voice. "Rebecca, you are." "I'm not normal, Mama. I know that. But I thought maybe I could be, if I tried hard enough." Catherine knelt on Rebecca's other side, taking her daughter's small hands in her own. "Sweetheart, normal is just a word. It doesn't mean better or worse. It just means common. And you're not common. You're extraordinary. But I can't do what other children can do. You can do things other children can't do. You can make thunder trust you with just your voice. You can draw pictures that make people cry with happiness. You can be brave when everything seems hopeless. Those aren't normal things. Those are special things." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, thinking, "But I still want to walk." "Then keep trying," James said. "But remember that your worth isn't measured by how far you can walk. It's measured by how big your heart is and how much you help others. Like how you helped Thunder learn to trust again? Exactly like that. You and Thunder have a lot in common. You both had to learn that being hurt doesn't mean being broken. Catherine watched her daughter's face as she processed James's words. Rebecca was growing up, learning hard lessons about perseverance and self-acceptance that some adults never mastered. "Can I try again tomorrow?" Rebecca asked. "You can try again whenever you want to," Catherine said. "But you don't have to. You're perfect just as you are." "I know, Mama, but I want to see how far I can go." That afternoon, Catherine found herself in the barn, brushing down her horse and thinking about the morning's events. She was proud of Rebecca's determination, but she was also worried. What if Rebecca pushed herself too hard? What if she got hurt again? What if she never achieved her goal of walking and ended up heartbroken? "You're thinking too much," James said, appearing in the barn doorway. "I'm thinking about Rebecca, about what happens if she can't do what she wants to do." "What happens if she can?" Catherine paused in her brushing. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if she learns to walk? What if she surprises everyone, including herself?" "Are you ready for that?" Catherine frowned. "Of course I'm ready. Why wouldn't I be? Because right now, Rebecca needs you for everything. If she becomes more independent, your relationship will change. Are you prepared for that?" The question hit Catherine like a physical blow. She hadn't considered the possibility that Rebecca's growing independence might make Catherine feel less needed, less important. "I want her to be independent," Catherine said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know you do, but wanting something and being ready for it are different things. Rebecca is growing up, Catherine. She's becoming her own person. That's scary for any parent, but especially for a parent who's been needed so intensely." Catherine set down the brush and leaned against her horse's warm flank. "I've spent 8 years being the answer to all her problems. If she doesn't need me anymore, she'll always need you, just differently. Instead of being her legs, you'll be her cheerleader. Instead of carrying her, you'll walk beside her. Instead of protecting her from the world, you'll help her face it." "What if I don't know how to do that?" "Then you'll learn. The same way Rebecca is learning to walk. One step at a time." That evening, Catherine sat on the porch with Rebecca, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Rebecca was sketching in her notebook, her pencil moving quickly across the paper. "What are you drawing?" Catherine asked. "A picture of this morning, of my first step." Rebecca held up the drawing, and Catherine gasped. It showed a small girl standing between wooden bars, her face fierce with determination. But what made Catherine's breath catch was the expression on the girl's face. It wasn't fear or pain, but pure joy. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. I want to remember how it felt. Even if I never walk all the way across the yard, I want to remember that I took one step." Catherine felt tears stinging her eyes. "You'll take more steps. I know you will. Maybe. But even if I don't, I'm not the same person I was this morning. I'm someone who tried something scary and didn't give up. That changes you, even if you don't get where you thought you wanted to go." Catherine stared at her daughter, amazed by her wisdom. "How did you get so smart?" "I had good teachers. You taught me to be brave. James taught me to be patient. And Thunder taught me that trust is something you have to earn, even from yourself." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I had to learn to trust that I was strong enough to try. And I had to learn to trust that it was okay to fail, as long as I kept trying." Catherine pulled Rebecca close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I love you so much, sweetheart. No matter what happens, no matter how far you walk or don't walk, I love you exactly as you are." "I know, Mama, and I love you too. But I also love who I'm becoming." As they sat together in the fading light, Catherine realized that Rebecca was right. Her daughter was changing, growing, becoming someone new. And Catherine was changing too, learning to love not just the child Rebecca had been, but the person she was becoming. It was scary and beautiful and heartbreaking and hopeful all at once. But then, Catherine thought, that's what love was. All the complicated feelings mixed together, creating something stronger than any single emotion could be. Tomorrow, Rebecca would try to walk again. And Catherine would be there, not to catch her if she fell, but to cheer her on as she flew. The courthouse steps were slippery with autumn rain as Catherine climbed them for what she hoped would be the final time, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and determination. In her arms, she carried a leather folder containing documents that could either save their family or destroy it forever. Harrison had found a new way to attack them, and this time, he was claiming that James's marriage to Catherine was fraudulent. "Are you ready for this?" James asked, his voice tight with worry, as he held the heavy courthouse door open for Catherine and Rebecca. "I have to be," Catherine replied, though her hands shook as she adjusted Rebecca's position in the wheelchair. "We've come too far to give up now." The hearing room was smaller than before, but it felt more dangerous. Harrison sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, his eyes cold and calculating. Behind him sat several men Catherine didn't recognize, witnesses, she assumed, who would testify against her family. Judge Morrison, the same man who had married Catherine and James, looked uncomfortable as he read from the official papers. Mr. Harrison claims that the marriage between Catherine and James Crawford was arranged solely for financial protection, not out of genuine affection. He's asking the court to declare the marriage invalid and strip Mrs. Crawford of her legal protections. Catherine felt sick. If Harrison succeeded, she would lose everything, the ranch, her legal standing, and quite possibly custody of Rebecca. In the 1880s, a woman declared morally unfit could have her children taken away. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mr. Harrison claims that Mr. Crawford married Mrs. Crawford only to gain access to her wealth, and that he has no genuine affection for her or her daughter. Rebecca gripped Catherine's hand tighter. At 9 years old, she understood enough to know that their family was under attack. Harrison's lawyer stood up, his voice smooth and confident. "Your Honor, we have evidence that this marriage was a business arrangement from the beginning. The couple barely knew each other before the wedding. Mr. Crawford was a struggling small rancher who stood to gain everything from this union, while Mrs. Crawford was a desperate woman who needed a man's name to protect her property." "That's not true," Rebecca said suddenly, her young voice cutting through the formal atmosphere like a blade. Judge Morrison looked surprised. "Young lady, you're not supposed to speak unless asked." "But they're lying about my family," Rebecca said, wheeling her chair forward. "They're saying James doesn't love us, but he does. He reads me stories every night. He helped me learn to take steps when nobody else believed I could. He makes my mama laugh for the first time since my papa died." Catherine's heart swelled with pride and terror. Rebecca was being brave, but Catherine was afraid her daughter's words wouldn't be enough to convince the judge. "Child," Judge Morrison said gently, "those are nice things, but they don't prove that your mother's marriage is genuine." "Then what would prove it?" Rebecca asked, her voice strong despite her small size. Harrison's lawyer smirked. "Your Honor, if this marriage is real, then surely Mr. Crawford won't mind giving up his claim to the ranch. A man who truly loves his wife would be willing to sign away his legal rights to her property." Catherine felt her breath catch. It was a trap. If James refused to sign, it would look like he had married her for money. If he agreed to sign, they would have no legal protection, and Harrison could still find ways to attack them. James stood up slowly, his face calm but his eyes blazing. "I'll sign whatever documents you want, Your Honor. I didn't marry Catherine for her ranch. I married her because I couldn't imagine living without her and Rebecca." "James, no," Catherine whispered. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," James said, looking directly at her. "I need everyone in this room to understand that I would choose you even if you had nothing. I would choose Rebecca even if she couldn't walk at all. I would choose this family over any amount of money or land." Harrison's lawyer looked triumphant. "Excellent. Then you won't mind signing this document giving up all claims to the Blackwood Ranch, now and forever." James took the paper and read it carefully. Catherine watched his face, seeing the moment when he understood what he was giving up. If something happened to Catherine, James would have no legal rights to the ranch, no way to protect Rebecca's inheritance. "James," Catherine said, standing up, "don't sign that. We'll find another way." "There is no other way," James said quietly. "And even if there was, I would still sign this, because I want everyone to know that I didn't marry you for what you own. I married you for who you are." He signed the document with steady hands, then looked at Judge Morrison. "Is there anything else you need me to give up to prove that I love my wife?" The courtroom was silent. Even Harrison looked surprised by James's willingness to sacrifice his legal protections. But Rebecca wasn't finished. She wheeled her chair to the center of the room, positioning herself where everyone could see her clearly. "Your Honor," she said, her voice carrying despite her small size. "May I show you something?" "I suppose so, child." Rebecca gripped the arms of her wheelchair and slowly, carefully, pushed herself to standing. Catherine held her breath, knowing how much effort this took, how much courage it required. Then, step by trembling step, Rebecca walked toward Judge Morrison's bench. It was only 10 steps, but she made each one count, her face set with determination. "I couldn't do this before James came to live with us," Rebecca said, slightly out of breath but standing tall. "He didn't help me walk because he wanted my mama's money. He helped me because he believes in me. He believes in both of us." Rebecca took a deep breath and continued. "A man who marries for money doesn't spend hours building special bars for a little girl to practice walking on. He doesn't read bedtime stories or teach her about horses or make her feel like she's special exactly as she is." Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. Rebecca was walking, really walking, and she was using her newfound ability to defend their family. "And he doesn't look at my mama the way James does," Rebecca continued, "like she's the most beautiful woman in the world. Like he can't believe how lucky he is to be with her." Rebecca walked back to her wheelchair and sat down, exhausted but victorious. "That's not what fake love looks like, Your Honor. That's what real love looks like." Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the family in front of him. "Mr. Harrison, do you have any evidence beyond financial speculation that this marriage is fraudulent?" Harrison's lawyer shuffled through his papers. "Well, Your Honor, the timing of the marriage was suspicious and—" "Mr. Harrison," Judge Morrison interrupted, "I've seen arranged marriages and marriages of convenience. I've also seen genuine affection. What I see here is a family that has chosen to stand together through difficulties. Mr. Crawford has just given up significant financial rights to prove his motives. This child has literally taken steps to defend her family. And Mrs. Crawford has consistently shown that she puts her family above her business interests." The judge banged his gavel. "I find no evidence of fraud in this marriage. The union between Catherine and James Crawford is valid and legal. Mr. Harrison, I suggest you find more productive ways to spend your time than attacking good families." Catherine felt her knees go weak with relief. They had won. They were safe. Their family was real and recognized by law. As they left the courthouse, Rebecca looked up at James with shining eyes. "I walked in court, James. I really walked." "You did more than walk, little miss. You showed everyone what courage looks like. And you showed everyone what love looks like," Rebecca replied. "Real love isn't about what you can get. It's about what you're willing to give up." Catherine looked at her husband and daughter, marveling at how much they had all grown. They had faced their biggest challenge yet and emerged not just victorious, but stronger. "So what do we do now?" James asked. "Now," Catherine said, "we go home. We're a family, and families belong together." As they walked toward their wagon, Catherine realized that Harrison had actually done them a favor. He had forced them to prove their love publicly, and in doing so, he had shown the whole community that the Crawford family was unbreakable. They had won more than a legal battle. They had won the right to be themselves, to love each other, and to build a future together. And that was worth more than all the gold in the Wyoming Territory. The golden light of sunset painted the ranch house in warm hues as Catherine stood on the porch, watching something that still took her breath away even after months of witnessing it. Rebecca was walking, really walking, across the yard toward the corral where Thunder waited, his golden coat gleaming in the evening light. "Slow down, sweetheart," Catherine called out, her voice a mixture of pride and protective worry. "Remember what Dr. Henderson said about not overdoing it." Rebecca paused in her careful steps, turning to smile at her mother. "I know, Mama, but Thunder gets worried if I take too long to visit him." It was true. The horse had formed an extraordinary bond with Rebecca, seeming to understand that she was special. He would stand perfectly still when she approached, lowering his head so she could reach him more easily, as if he knew that every step she took was a victory. James appeared from the barn, his face lighting up as he saw Rebecca making her way across the yard. "Looking good, little miss. Your balance is getting better every day." "I've been practicing," Rebecca said, slightly out of breath but glowing with accomplishment. "I can walk almost 50 steps now before I need to rest." Catherine felt her heart swell with pride. 6 months ago, Rebecca hadn't been able to stand without support. Now she was walking independently, slowly but surely, proving that determination and love could overcome obstacles that seemed impossible. "I have something to show you both," Rebecca said, reaching the corral fence and gripping it for support. "I've been working on it in secret." From her dress pocket, she pulled out a small carved horse, no bigger than her palm. It was beautifully detailed, with a flowing mane and kind eyes that reminded Catherine of thunder. "Did you make this?" James asked, taking the carving and examining it carefully. "I've been learning from watching you work with wood," Rebecca said, her cheeks pink with pride. "I wanted to make something special for you, to thank you for helping me learn to walk." James's eyes filled with tears. "Rebecca, this is beautiful, but you don't need to thank me. Seeing you succeed is the greatest gift I could ask for." "But I do need to thank you," Rebecca insisted. "Before you came, I thought I was broken. You showed me that I was just scared. There's a big difference." Catherine watched this exchange, marveling at how much her daughter had grown. Rebecca wasn't just walking now. She was thinking differently, seeing herself as someone who could overcome challenges rather than someone who was defined by limitations. "I have news," Catherine said, deciding it was time to share the letter she had received that morning. "The territorial government has officially recognized our ranch as one of the most successful in Wyoming. They want to feature us in their annual report." "What does that mean?" Rebecca asked. "It means your mama's business skills are being recognized throughout the territory," James explained. "It's a great honor. But more than that," Catherine continued, "it means that people are starting to see that a woman can run a successful ranch, that a family like ours can contribute to the community." Rebecca's eyes sparkled with understanding. "So we're not just surviving anymore. We're thriving." "Exactly," Catherine said. "We're proof that different doesn't mean less. We're proof that love and determination can overcome prejudice and fear." As they stood together in the evening light, Catherine reflected on how much had changed since that first day when James had appeared at their gate. Then, she had been a woman defined by her fears. Fear of losing her ranch, fear of Rebecca's limitations, fear of trusting anyone with their future. Now, she was a woman defined by her strengths. Her ability to love fiercely, to fight for what mattered, to build something beautiful from the challenges life had given her. "There's something else," Catherine said, pulling out another letter. "The Territorial School Board has asked Rebecca to speak at their conference about children with special needs. They want to hear her thoughts on how schools can better serve students like her." Rebecca's mouth fell open. "They want me to speak? In front of grown-ups? They want to hear from someone who understands what it's like to face challenges and overcome them," Catherine explained. "You have wisdom that could help other children. But I'm just 9 years old." "Age doesn't determine wisdom," James said gently. "You've learned things that many adults never learn. You've learned that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being scared and trying anyway." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, thinking, "If I speak at their conference and if other children hear what I have to say, maybe they won't feel so alone. Maybe they'll know that being different can be something special." "I think that's exactly what they need to hear," Catherine said. As the sun set completely, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, the family made their way back to the house. Rebecca walked between Catherine and James, her steps steady and sure. "I used to think that success meant being normal," Rebecca said thoughtfully. "But now I think success means being the best version of yourself, even if that version is different from everyone else." "Where did you learn that?" Catherine asked. "From you," Rebecca said simply. You taught me that worth isn't measured by what other people think. It's measured by how much love you give and how much courage you show. Catherine felt tears of joy on her cheeks. Her daughter had learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength came from within, not from meeting other people's expectations. What do you want to be when you grow up? James asked Rebecca as they reached the porch. Rebecca considered this seriously. I want to be someone who helps other people find their courage. Maybe I'll be a teacher, or maybe I'll work with animals like you do, or maybe I'll run a ranch like Mama. But whatever I do, I want to help people see that different isn't less. Catherine looked at her daughter with wonder. Rebecca had transformed from a child who saw herself as broken into a young woman who saw herself as uniquely gifted. That transformation hadn't happened because Rebecca had learned to walk. It had happened because she had learned to believe in herself. I think you're going to change the world, sweetheart, Catherine said. Maybe, Rebecca replied. But first, I want to finish changing myself. I want to keep getting stronger, keep learning new things, keep proving that there's no limit to what someone can do if they don't give up. As they settled on the porch for their evening ritual of watching the stars come out, Catherine realized that their story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. They had faced their greatest challenges and emerged victorious, but more importantly, they had learned who they truly were. They were a family built on love, strengthened by adversity, and united by their refusal to let anyone else define their worth. They were proof that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. And in the vast Wyoming Territory, under a sky full of stars, they had found their place in the world, not as victims of circumstance, but as architects of their own destiny. The weight of gold, Catherine realized, was nothing compared to the weight of love. And love, unlike gold, only grew more valuable when it was shared.